Hola everyone, ¿qué tal? Hoy tenemos que ver este video. Es cerca de transgenderio. Anyway, so what we're going to be doing today is watching this video, the Cass Report, Anti-Science and Anti-Trans. Again, we had a little vote. Last time I mentioned that the vote was excitingly close, such that the front runner actually changed. In this case, it wasn't close. You guys really wanted me to respond to this, which is cool. I don't claim to be the Cass Report expert here. I hope I'll have a lot to say, because you guys really wanted to hear my thoughts on this. On the off chance, I say off chance, it's not that unlikely that we get through this 40-minute video quickly. I think I'll start responding to the very related Vaush video, but what I will do is then open up the votes next week, nominations and all that, just in case you guys are all Cass reported out. But seeing as, like I said, I can imagine myself finishing this with plenty of time to spare, might as well jump into that. All right, let's do this now. Boom, 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 boom.
But prior to that, they had already released some preliminary findings.
You know what? This person talks slow enough that I'm going to do something I very rarely do. I'm going to slightly speed them up. I usually don't do that because I'm aware that you guys would probably maybe want to speed me up a bit, and I don't want you to be unable to understand what this person's saying. But I think I'm only speeding them up so much that they'll be talking at about the same rate I'm talking, so it shouldn't be an issue if you're watching this at 2 times or what, however fast you might be watching this as you're playing it back.
And that's quite surprising, that the conclusions of the seemingly very detailed, nearly 400-page document was to recommend the exact opposite of the current standards recommended by organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and every other major medical organization in the United States. Because
it's not that surprising that 2 different countries might be doing 2 different things. Obviously the indication there, and you would think that a kind of a wokey critical theory person should be aware of the idea that science can be influenced by culture. I have it behind me somewhere. Here. Is science multicultural? This is just a generic book about so it's the subtitle is Post-Colonialisms, Feminisms and Epistemologies. Just one of many kind of books you'll see, basically focusing on the kind of intersection. Oh, I've really trashed everything there. That's going to fall over at some point, but whatever. The intersections between identity politics, issues, or kind of sociological issues, and hard sciences. And while I think sometimes that can go too far, and I think, talking about decolonializing physics or whatever is kind of silly, I do think obviously with something like medicine, it's reasonable to talk about the fact that it's not completely cold hard science. There are senses in which sociologically what we kind of construct as illnesses and treatments in society is going to impact medicine. So of course, it's not that surprising that the United States and the UK might have different views on a medical issue, because maybe there's a cultural thing. Maybe a country like America is more likely to medicalize issues that shouldn't be medicalized, for example.
It was largely embraced by transphobes around the world who cited it as proof that treating kids with gender dysphoria medically is ultimately some kind of child abuse.
No, okay, so I don't know anyone who does that. At the end of the day, none of this is proof. Essentially, what this shows is that there's at least enough ambiguity that a serious medical organization has come down on a different side of this issue. One of the arguments they'll make is they'll say, well, every single medical organization agrees with us. That's what trans activists say. But then when a kind of medical organization comes along and they produce a different result, they say, well, obviously this is they'll try to kind of cast doubt on it by saying, well, this is in disagreement with all the other organizations. If you're going to dismiss anything anything from a medical organization that contradicts what you're saying because it's contradicting all of what the other medical organizations are saying, then you're basically making your position kind of unfalsifiable, because you're just like, well, whatever the medical organization currently says right now, or the kind of medical establishment currently says right now, that's correct. And anything else, even from the medical establishment that contradicts that, well, we can dismiss it because it contradicts what everyone else is saying, which is such an obviously stupid way of letting your mind work. I mean, the fact the medical establishment is wrong about so much stuff means that this report, it doesn't prove anything. What I've always said is that what we should simply entertain the idea that maybe psychiatry is the better way to go, that maybe medicalizing this issue isn't the best way to go. That we should leave the door open. That's my main point.
Also, that scientific consensus isn't as solidified as it is in other fields for other topics like evolution and climate change.
Yeah. Good job admitting that. What you should recognize is that's a pretty big thing to admit, right? Because the whole argument around this issue is like people just willfully pretend that this issue that we've really only been able to discuss for a few decades at most, and even then it is something that has evolved rapidly, such that a few decades ago we were really discussing something fundamentally different, and people act as if this is like established science, like evolution and the shape of the earth and things like that, which is insane. But when I say, hey, maybe actually we should leave the door open for all sorts of different considerations around this issue, because maybe affirmation isn't the best way to go, people act as if I'm basically act as if I'm denying evolution or arguing that the earth is flat. So it's good to see someone admit, like a trans activist admit, that this is not as established as those issues. But once you admit that, the question becomes, how can you then be so resistant to people having all sorts of different opinions on this? And how can this person, I don't know if I will include this clip, but they have previously in this video just referred to people who embrace the Cass report as transphobes. So I don't understand how you can continue to poison the well around anyone who has like a slightly critical attitude towards the affirmation approach. It doesn't make much sense to me.
Claims that their systematic overview found little to no evidence for the benefit of puberty blockers, but they recommend a purely psychological approach instead, which has no evidence of benefit either.
But it has no evidence of negative side effects. That's the key thing. So generally speaking, I think it's completely reasonable to say that you should always err on the side of a less extreme medical intervention. So if there's no solid evidence for the benefits of puberty blockers, and there's no solid evidence for the benefits of therapy, talking therapies, you recommend talking therapies every time. You can continue to do the puberty blockers thing as like a test, with like control groups and things like that, to see if there's evidence that works better. It's not surprising that if you have two situations and both of them don't have concrete evidence for being best, that you would recommend the one that is least intrusive and has the fewest side effects, and that's going to be talking therapy.
Okay, so if puberty blockers have some use cases according to their review.
Okay, so basically they're slightly changing the parameters, saying, well, they haven't found any clear evidence of any benefit to talking therapy, but they found some clear evidence of potential benefits for puberty blockers, then surely that makes it even more obvious that you should favor the puberty blockers. But again, I still think the point applies that you should favor the thing that's less intrusive and has fewer negative side effects. So even if you then say, well, what if puberty blockers, there actually is some evidence of puberty blockers being good. And the other thing is like, it's so ignorant, because we know that there are adults and even people who are still children who have gone on the record saying that they regret taking puberty blockers. I can't imagine anyone's going to say they regret having talking therapy, because talking therapy, that's like, I can't even imagine because what are the long-term side effects of talking therapy? There aren't really any, whereas there are for puberty blockers. So it's just so obvious to me that you would need really strong evidence for I can't get my brain around it because it's like so obvious that you would need strong evidence for puberty blockers being definitely the right way to go in order to say that should be the standard default way of treating gender dysphoria in children. Because that has serious side effects and it is irreversible. Whereas talking therapy, no issue.
Cis Supremacy and the UK's Approach to Healthcare for Trans Children by Cal Horton from...
I mean, just the title alone. We can ignore that. What, cis supremacy?
From 1.8% to 15.1%, but the study actually showed a non-significant increase from 13.8% to 15.1%. Just kind of dropped a little 3 there. Whoops. That's just...
So is that just like a like they were just wrong? Like, what's the deal there? Because, I mean, I don't know, like, the thing about this, though, it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, so if that's the kind of mistakes that these people can make, and let's be clear, okay, whoever this Cass person is, this is the medical establishment. This isn't about trans ideology versus gender critical. It's not about it, it's about the medical establishment. If there is an error in a like gender critical kind of leaning text put out by the medical establishment, what that tells me is that the medical establishment can make mistakes, right? I think it is wrong to think about this issue ideologically. No, if these are mistakes that kind of doctors and healthcare professionals working in the medical establishment can make, that says something about the medical establishment. It reminds me of, okay, I'm not anti-vax. I imagine some people who watch me possibly are, but I always think about this, so I'm going to mention it now because I don't have many other opportunities to mention it. H Bomber Guy has a video called Anti-Vaccines, A Measured Response. It's a perfectly fine video. It's well made and it documents some significant stuff, but I'll give you a basic summary. Essentially, it shows how the push for the idea that vaccines cause autism was entirely nonsense and was actually being pushed by a guy called, I think his name was Andrew Wakefield. And basically, Andrew Wakefield, he used a whole load of really, really dodgy nonsense science to argue for this idea that vaccines cause autism. And he even did some really gross, inhumane experiments on children as part of this theory. And absolutely, I think anyone who watches that video should immediately realize this whole idea that vaccines cause autism is nonsense. However, he released this in the midst of the whole COVID vaccine anxiety. And the one thing I couldn't help but notice is that it turns out Andrew Wakefield, the person who first started pushing this vaccines cause autism thing, he wasn't actually arguing that all vaccines cause autism. He was arguing that one specific type of vaccine causes autism because, and this is the key thing, he had his own vaccine he was trying to sell and basically he was invested in. I think maybe he'd worked on it, I can't remember. But basically, he had a financial incentive to encourage people to take this other vaccine instead. So then you look at that and you're like, hold on a minute. You know, H Bomber Guy is presenting this as if this proves that vaccines in general are fine and great and wonderful. But when you actually look at the video is about a vaccine maker and investor and profiteer who specifically lied about something in order to make a huge amount of money from selling his vaccines. So again, I'm not anti-vax. With most things, for example, I'll just say this on the record, with for example, the COVID vaccine, my attitude is it was a new vaccine. Maybe there could be side effects. I think that people worried about side effects, that's a legitimate thing. But generally speaking, I think that certainly the people who believe that there is an active effort to put brain control stuff in vaccines and things like that, I think that's stupid. I don't think there's a conscious conspiracy theory. And I would tend to think that people who believe that there are obvious, basically almost kind of proven issues with the vaccine or any kind of medical treatment that the government just hasn't noticed or that they're just denying. I think generally speaking, I'm not inclined to believe that because I'm like, well, you know, I don't like the government, I don't trust the establishment, but I think like when it, like they're not just going to randomly let loads of people die for no reason. Like I don't really, with a lot of, sorry, I'm going to change my, I'm really close to the camera. Oh well, I just thought I'd get some more light. With like a lot of conspiracy theories, it kind of falls apart when you're like, well, why would they do that? You know, like the idea that like the government knows that the vaccines are causing heart attacks and cardiac arrests and things like that, but they're just like letting it happen. Why? Like, who is it benefiting? Like, that's what I don't get. But anyway, so I say all that. I'm not anti-vax is the point, and that's not because like, you know, of any political reason or anything like that. I just don't really see the evidence for being or for believing there's like some big conspiracy theory around it. And again, that's not because I'm resistant to conspiracy theories themselves. I think a lot of conspiracy theories are correct, but just not this one. Anyway, but when you actually look at what H-Bomber Guy's video is about, like I say, it's about somebody who made vaccines, who was basically a vaccine profiteer in the vaccine industry. And he was lying and doing all these inhumane experiments as part of his effort to sell and legitimize his vaccines. And when you think about it, you're like, that should actually bolster the anti-vax argument. Like, in a way, like, as someone who went into that video not feeling any particular, like, anti-vax sentiment, I left it and I was like, well, I guess I have to be, at least on some level, a little bit more anti-vax now, because H-Bomber Guy has just told me this story about somebody who was selling vaccines and lying and scamming people, basically. But the point there, as you can kind of, I hope, infer, is what I'm saying there is I think a lot of people, they take situations where it's different sides or there's an argument, and they act as if the conclusion there is that one side of the argument is right or wrong. Whereas I think a reasonable way to look at it a lot of the time is think, well, actually, doesn't this say something about the whole discipline, really? Like, if this is the medical establishment, the people who are supposed to be in charge of keeping us healthy, and they're having all these disagreements. You know, what one person's saying we should have these vaccines, another person says, oh no, those vaccines cause autism, but then it turns out actually they're just saying that because they're trying to sell their own vaccines and things like that. On some level, the message there has to be, well, we should be a little bit suspicious of all this stuff. You know, and that's, so I would never say like there's not anything in particular where I'm like, oh, obviously this is sus, but yeah, clearly it makes sense to be a little bit suspicious of all this stuff. And with that said, yeah, so basically what we have here is apparently, seemingly, a medical establishment paper that literally says there was an increase from 2012 to 2015, 1.8% to 15.1%, and actually it was 13.8%. So just missing a 3. Off by over a factor of 10 there, right? I'm going to have to, like, I'm going to let it play, but, like, to me, that's just insane. But again, the takeaway I get from that is not, oh, the Cass report is bad. It's like, oh, wow, like, this is the people who are supposed to be in charge of keeping us healthy, and they can't, and like, they write a paper, and it's a really important paper. Like, this is a really important issue, and what, they can't even get the statistics right? And, like, no, I'm not going to believe that this is just because, like, well, yeah, sure, like, these people are wrong, but that's because they're the transphobes and the transphobes. No, like, it's still the same industry. Like, this person still went up through the medical establishment in the same way that everyone else did, and they're making mistakes like this. I think that's just a concern in general.
15.8% to 15.1%. Just kind of dropped a little 3 there. Whoops. That's just one very easy, simple to understand example out of several that Guy Sales points out, in which...
And apparently there's several of these, which, yeah, like, I don't know, like, that's... Again, to me, if I was, like, a member of the medical establishment and I was looking at that, I wouldn't just, like, point out to be like, hey, look at this mistake that this person made. Surely you'd think on some level, well, surely this is, like, a massive problem, right? Like... and again, because I think the reason why I say this particularly for this is because there is a kind of whole system of education where you go up, because So I guess like the analogy I'd make, because obviously like you might say, well, hold on, if I see like a gender critical person make a stupid mistake, I don't assume that automatically reflects on the entire gender critical movement. So why is it when a medical establishment person sees another medical establishment person make a little mistake, or a big mistake in this case, that should reflect negatively on the entire medical establishment? But because there's this kind of system of education, like a good analogy I think would be something like the Catholic Church or any religious organization where they kind of have a seminary system where it's like the way that you become a pastor or a priest or whatever is by going to seminary, where there's basically a whole curriculum and there are teachers and there's this entire kind of educational institution that is controlled by the church, so that you have a kind of orthodoxy. If I was writing like against somebody in that context, and this person went to the same seminary as me and whatever, and they made a massive mistake, I'd have to be like they were just completely wrong about a whole load of stuff. I don't think I'd be able to just say, oh, isn't it interesting that that one person's wrong about all this stuff? You'd have to say on some level, well, clearly this points to a massive problem with our seminary, or like the entire educational institutions of our particular religious movement. And it's the exact same thing here, right? Like, you have to go to medical school to become a doctor. There's like standards and stuff, and clearly someone's setting those standards and setting a curriculum, and clearly on some level this is failing if someone can become really high up, write a really important report, and still make such a massive mistake. And that's a huge mistake to make. Being off by a factor of 10 over that on a statistic you're quoting.
The rabid anti-science transphobic mob, because no, they're going to be propping this up for years, which is why I'm grateful that the actual...
I don't get that. I don't get like, oh, they're going to be propping this up for years. Like, I guess maybe, but again, for me, my attitude is just, I don't care. Like, again, I didn't need a report for any of this stuff. And what I really care about is legislation. Like, we don't, like, you know, you can keep your report by the medical establishment that says, hey, yeah, it turns out maybe, because again, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the main issue of trans identity is that you're lying about reality. Whether that is of a medical benefit to somebody is not really the main issue here. Most importantly, I don't really think it's worth talking about the medical way of treating trans identity until we tackle the sociological issues of trans identity, right? Like, what's the point in getting involved in this massive medical question around trans identity if we're not addressing all of the ideological and sociological issues that are causing the huge number of children to even think that they are trans in the first place? Like, we're talking about treating trans kids as if we're accepting that trans kids are a real thing that just naturally occurs, instead of being the result of ideological brainwashing and massive sociological problems in our society. That's why this is kind of uninteresting to me, and I'm certainly not going to be propping up this report as some big deal. Like, oh, here's how to solve a problem that shouldn't really exist in the first place. Okay, I don't really care, you know? It's like if we had like a report about how to attach people's arms once they've been chopped off, and we weren't passing any legislation to deal with the katana wielding ninjas who keep running around chopping people's arms off. Like, I don't really care about the report about how we reattach people's arms. How about we stop the people chopping people's arms off? That seems like the obvious way to go to me.
Now, I left all of this info till the end of this video because I didn't want you to cry that I'm poisoning the well or ad hominem.
I mean, I don't know how you can, like, if you wanted to avoid accusations of poisoning the well, you shouldn't have immediately started off calling anyone who disagrees with you a transphobe, because it's funny. I already accused you of poisoning the well, and I don't regret it, because that is accurate, and you're silly for thinking that you were doing anything to avoid that. Well, everyone, we've finished, so we've been recording for less than 40 minutes. We're about halfway through the amount of time I'd allotted for myself to record. Well, not the amount of time I allotted for myself to record, but because it took me a little while to get set up. The amount of time I've allotted for myself to get set up and then start recording. I'm going to start watching this, like I say, related video. The cast report is pseudo-scientific trash. I don't know if I'm going to have anything significant to say about it, but I'm going to suspect that I wouldn't be upset if this ended up not winning any future votes, because, you know, who wants to listen to Vaush?
So who here has heard?
It's honestly been so long since I've like listened to Vaush in terms of like him giving an opinion that matters. Like the last time I was listening to Vaush about anything was the whole him watching like pedophile horse porn thing, and like his his defenses of that, and that was quite a funny saga to follow. And I did actually listen to like his like full. Like, I watched, like, a whole stream of his just because I was like, I have to hear what he's saying about this. Yeah, I haven't, in terms of, like, anything where he's, like, giving an opinion that matters, I haven't like, paid attention to him in ages, so it'll be interesting to see what's going on here.
Cass, that's the person in charge of this, met with DeSantis pick over trans ban. Her review now targets England trans care. So the reason...
You know what, actually, this is kind of funny because, like, so at the end of the is her name Rebecca Watson video, she, like, said about this whole, like, thing about who Cass met with and blah, 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 like, doing this whole kind of guilt by association thing. And then said, the reason I'm saying this at the end is so no one can accuse me of poisoning the well. And that's why I kind of said the whole, like, poisoning the well response thing. Vaush, on the other hand, is literally starting off with this. So he's literally doing, like, what... Rebecca Watson kind of admitted would be poisoning the well, which is quite funny.
Trans issues and trans issues specifically, and no other field of medicine specifically for that, the argument is, yeah, we just think that, you know, the children should be handled with special care, by which we mean, you know, people under 25. Yeah.
Well, again, so I don't really know. Under 25, that's because people shouldn't be able to consent to... infertility, to sterilization before the age of 25, and I think it's a very reasonable position to uphold.
Or under the age of 26, actually. Yeah, it's pretty bad. That explicitly makes it harder to transition smoothly. They want you to suffer. Okay.
No, we don't. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is not suffering. Like, that's the thing. Like, this is so dishonest, that framing there. If it was possible, if I could wave a magic wand and have every single trans person be inexpressibly happy, just so happy, I would do that. Everyone would. I mean, for me, the medical transition thing, that's not as big of an issue. The thing that bothers me is the lie about reality of saying that medical transition causes a biological male to become a woman. That's my main concern.
The author of the Cass review will say things like, there's biological evidence that boys and girls have preferences for, like, trucks and Barbies, respectively.
That's got, so, like, just for the record, if they were saying that, that would be a trans ideology position. That is actually pro-trans to say that boys like trucks and girls like Barbies. Because that's saying that there is something in the brain in terms of, like, behavior. Like, you are the people who talk about how a biological male can be a woman if they live the role of a woman. So, and that is on the same continuum as arguing that boys like trucks and girls like Barbie.
Like the idea that you should have to, like, be treated as a child up till 25 when it comes to trans healthcare. Like, based on what? Why would you make that prescription? What is that?
That's so obvious. It's so obvious you don't understand. How do you not understand this? The fact that becoming infertile is a huge decision. There's so many 18-year-olds who might not think they want kids, but they're just like, that is such a big choice to make, and it's projecting your mind really far into the future. Most people nowadays are having kids at like 30. So, you know, like, in terms of, if you just think about it logically, right? Like, so in the UK, I think this is too young, but in the UK, you can't have sex until you're 16. Most people, basically, if they're going to start having sex, it's going to be pretty early on in their life, right? Like, in their adult life, like, maybe 16, but, you know, certainly, like, in their early 20s or whatever. And, like, drinking alcohol and things like that. Like, most of these things, the question it pertains to is something that actually a lot of the time people are going to want to start doing before this date or before this age anyway. Whereas with infertility, the issue is, like, that decision of whether or not you have a kid, that's a decision that people have to make when they are decidedly adults, like they are 30 or whatever. And therefore, people shouldn't be able to make the decision to completely cut off their option of making that choice until they're 25. This is such an obvious thing. The fact he doesn't get this is just ridiculous.
That based on? Well, it's based on vibes. But when it comes to...
No, it's not based on vibes. Like, again, okay, see, I know, I literally have already said he's got his whole, like, lolly, watching little children doing all sorts of stuff that is not appropriate for little children to be doing. I know that he's into that in a big way. But he has to, I guess he doesn't get this. But having an age of consent, that's not vibes. It's not vibes that you have an age of consent. It's very important, Vaush. And I know you are the last person in the world who would understand this. But on some level, I have to, but I don't believe you can understand this. But I know that you guys need me to point this out, so I will point it out. It's not vibes.
This is being widely denounced by actual medical agencies. I believe the American Psychiatric Association.
I like how he just says actual medical agencies. The NHS, National Health Service, is a medical agency. It's been a medical agency since what, 1948? I think it's woefully insufficient now as an organization, but it was at the time like the kind of one of the most advanced thing the world had ever seen. Right? Like, I'm pretty sure when the NHS was created, it was like the first time anyone had thought, what if we had a state-funded, not thought, but, like actually implemented, having a state-funded healthcare that is free at the point of access to everyone. So, yeah, it's quite a big deal, the NHS. So to be like, the actual medical agencies disagree with it. Like, okay, so what's the NHS then?
The report endorses the idea that being trans might be caused by anxiety, depression, and OCD issues, despite the American Psychological Association, the largest psychological association in the world, rebutting this as lacking evidence. See, this is what I mean. The CAS report will...
Wait, hold a minute. The idea that being transgender may be caused by anxiety, depression, and what's the rebut? It lacks evidence. You don't need evidence to say something may be true. Right? You can't... I feel like this should be obvious. You can't rebut a maybe claim or a might claim with that lacks evidence. I say, I think that Rishi Sunak might be gay. There we go. That's what I'm going for. I think Rishi Sunak might be gay. Now, is there any evidence that Rishi Sunak is gay? No, not that I know of. But you can't claim to have refuted me by saying, well, there's no evidence, right? If I say, I think Rishi Sunak might be gay, if you say, actually, there's no concrete evidence that he is gay, then you've not refuted me. If I was saying Rishi Sunak definitely is gay, so yeah, if I said, like, yeah, absolutely, no doubt, trans identity is definitely caused by anxiety and depression, then you could refute me if you show, well, there's not really any evidence for that. But if I just say that might be true, you're not refuting anything I say.
Offhandedly and flippantly dismiss tons of evidence against its claims, but then, just like, oh, maybe it's this. Like, you don't need evidence to say, like, oh, maybe the trans kids are actually just autistic. They can just say that,
Yeah, of course you can. Because, these people, they need to stop getting so triggered about the fact that you are allowed to speculate things. Like, I don't know what happened that got so many people to think that it's, evil to just say, hey, maybe this is the case. To just, think, hey, this could be true. And, you're allowed to believe something that doesn't have much evidence just because of, vibes, because it kind of seems like from what you know, and, stuff that wouldn't hold up in, a formal review or whatever. I know someone's going to say, oh, this is a formal review, so therefore it matters here. The thing is, the review is simply saying that there is room for this speculation. And there can be, a formal review can say there's room for rampant speculation, and it doesn't have to provide evidence for that speculation, because it's just saying, there is room for this speculation. There is room for saying that this could be about depression or anxiety. Like, and these people, they just need to get over that fact that we are allowed to say, oh, I think it could be this.
See, it sounds neutral, but it's been carefully crafted to avoid making any affirmative statements about the identities of these young people or protecting them from transphobia.
Good. Like, these people, they get so triggered by everything. But, like, first of all, yeah, I don't want anyone to be affirming trans identity. And I don't really want anyone to be talking about protecting people from transphobia because of how that's often used, like what it actually in practice means. Yeah, this is just, it's embarrassing from Vaush here. To just be like, oh, I'm annoyed because it doesn't like give, what's the word, like pay lip service to my specific issues. Like, oh, that's so sad for you, I'm sorry.
Or giving them options medically and socially to transition. It's neutral for a reason. The whole goddamn report seems to be like that, as far as I can tell, or the review, I should say. And, you know, this is all made to be very like politically accessible. The cast review was commissioned.
He's like so upset that this isn't like just bending over backwards to appease trans identity. It's like, it's so sad for him that that's the case.
If we were talking about any other medical issue, like a heart condition or diabetes, the language of the doctor would be pretty unambiguous in what exactly they were trying to treat. It wouldn't be multiple minutes of, make sure that children with diabetes or...
Oh my God. So like basically what he's saying here is he's discovered the shocking truth that this incredibly like sociologically complex reality and philosophically complex reality of trans identification is different from an unambiguous material medical issue. And he's like, look at this, there's an inconsistency. It's like, yeah, obviously. And to be fair, like that should apply to other mental health issues as well. We shouldn't talk about depression with the same concrete language with which we talk about cancer because they are different things.
You would have some kind of specific, like, yeah, the diabetes is bad, actually. You know, like, yeah, by the way, the diabetes...
Yeah, by the way, being trans is bad, actually. There we go. Solved it. There you go. Don't worry, Vaush, I helped.
Is bad, to be clear. Like, any kind of indication whatsoever. But you listen to the language, you know? Again, very carefully practiced.
At risk. And that's not okay. It's just not acceptable.
I would say it's not carefully practiced. I actually think it's literally just the way that anyone who's not like a lunatic and like, I mean, he's used the word partisan loads. The funny thing is he's the partisan. Anyone who's not like a complete partisan who is only concerned about pushing their identity would talk about it in these terms. Like I would not need to try to talk in this way. I imagine Hillary Cass is not trying to talk this way. I imagine like the many people in the UK who are aware of this debate and are immediately struck by how reasonable this debate actually is when you really think about what's being said, are using this language because they genuinely recognize it is the most appropriate way to talk about this issue. It really is that simple.
The woman who we're looking at right now warned Kemi Badenoch, the Women and Equalities Minister, about the risks of a ban on conversion therapy, considered by most reasonable medical professionals to be a form of torture. This woman...
No. Okay, here's the thing. Again, the conversion therapy, I literally spoke about it last time. I'm not going to go through it again. The whole thing, it's a form of torture. Okay, so, but here's the problem, right? It's a form of, it's the equivocation thing, right? It's a form of torture. So, you know, oh, excuse me, you know, I'm gay and I don't want to be gay. Could you, you know, just sit here and like talk to me about it and I'll tell you like why I've got concerns about being gay. Okay, you know, actually, you know, I've kind of realized that maybe I'm not gay. Maybe, you know, you know, maybe I'm bisexual, maybe what, who knows, but whatever. And, you know, talking it through has really helped. That's torture. That's the problem, right? Because when you actually think what conversion therapy can be, conversion therapy, if we're saying words should mean things, conversion therapy has to mean any like discussion that could be therapeutic, that could lead to somebody changing their own attitude towards their understanding of their sexuality. But then, if you then say conversion therapy is torture, and of course when people say it's torture, they're talking about like the people being put into like camps where they're not allowed to leave and they're like denied food and they're punished and, you know, told to be ashamed of themselves and things like that. Well, yeah, of course, that's torture, but that doesn't have to be what conversion therapy is.
So this extremely neutral, measured language is being expressed by a woman who, after publishing the review that we are currently looking at, went on to say, wait, you can't ban conversion therapy.
Okay, two things. One, it's not like someone's not being hypocritical if they talk with like a very kind of professional neutrality in one instance, and in another instance they appear to have very strong opinions about something. Second of all, I don't think she even is expressing strong opinions about this issue. I think that pointing out that there could be risks that should be avoided by if you are going to try to introduce a full-on blanket ban on conversion therapy. And again, I don't think we should have any ban on conversion therapy. I think we should have a ban on keeping people in camps against their will. We should have a ban on giving people unnecessary like electroshock therapy and things like that. We should have a ban on everything about conversion therapy that actually does make it torture. Because again, the stupid thing about ban on conversion therapy is it's like all of the bad things associated with conversion therapy, they would be bad if you did them to somebody for reasons unrelated to conversion therapy. The conversion therapy thing isn't what makes it bad. But yeah, like, I think it's reasonable and perfectly neutral if someone just point out we should be mindful of these concerns. He seems to be suggesting some kind of hypocrisy here. There really isn't.
There are doctors who want to practice that. Let's not go crazy now, you know? I want to dispel any like myth of political neutrality here. You know, she came into this with
What's the neutrality? I mean, what's the lack of neutrality?
with a bias. She noted in her review, Cass said professionals supporting young people with gender incongruence or distress, that's the language, gender incongruence or distress, you know.
So again, I mean, like, even Philosophy Tube, who's like supposed to be like a big trans person, has said that gender dysphoria doesn't exist. So like the idea of, hey, this person didn't use the word gender dysphoria, therefore they must just hate trans people is nonsense.
Suffering from the mental illness that makes you think that you're not the gender that you are, that they were
based. Apart from the fact that it's not gender, of course, because gender is a made up thing. But yeah, like, don't freak out, Vaush. Like, get over it. Yeah, this is a problem, and people are right to talk about the genuine issue of like people believing that they should deny reality.
She is fully defending conversion therapy here, which is torture. Gender incongruence.
No, it's not. It's not torture. It's not torture. Torture's torture. Conversion therapy can be torture if part of the conversion therapy is torture. Just like anything can be torture if part of like, disciplining your child can be torture if you, counterterrorism can be torture, right? But that doesn't mean that we should ban counterterrorism because counterterrorism is torture. Detaining people, like what they do in America with the whole, what's it called? Solitary confinement. Like, that's torture. Like, I've seen like diagrams of American prison cells. That's torture. Like, literally, like, rooms where they've got no TV, they've got like a tiny like arrow slit for a window, their room's completely grey, concrete, there's no one else there with them, they're not allowed to like leave their room or anything like that. And that's like what some maximum security prisons are like in the US. Like, I'm saying that's torture. Like, that would be, I could just not even imagine that. Of course, what they're doing on Guantanamo Bay is torture, things like that. But to say the detention of, I mean, let's say in that case, the detention of terrorists. I was going to say terrorist suspects. The thing about, well, the big problem with Guantanamo Bay is that they're detaining suspects because they know they don't have the evidence to charge these people. And that's like why Guantanamo Bay is such an evil place, because it's basically a black site where the Constitution doesn't apply, because even though they've not actually got the evidence to charge these terror suspects with any crimes, they can keep them detained indefinitely and torture them. Obviously, I hope you all know that Guantanamo Bay is evil. But let's assume these people are actually terrorists, right? Is it torture to detain a terrorist in a black site and waterboard them? Yes, that's torture. Is it torture to detain terrorists full stop? No. Like, this is so obvious. Like, there's so many things which can be torture, but that doesn't mean the act itself is torture. Because again, like, any therapeutic discussion which causes someone to reevaluate their own attitude towards their sense of their own sexuality, like, if you are going to say that words should mean things, you'd have to say that is conversion therapy. But is it a bad thing? No.
Apparently, at one point, while describing non-binary young people, they didn't, like, I don't know, feel like having any actual people. So there was an AI-generated image that they used in the report to, like, as as a stand-in. Non-binary is when you dye your hair, you see.
Okay, look. I think probably one of the reasons why, to me, it doesn't seem that weird that they didn't want to include an actual person as like an example of a non-binary person, because if you're talking about like a non-binary person, like I think that's a perfectly fine thing to do, frankly. I think in the future, I will say this, like everyone talks about AI, I do think that there are some things that AI basically taking over, well not taking over, but things where, like, especially like corporate stuff and things like that, we might as well just have AI with that. Like, what's the word? Corporate images. I'm trying to think of like the expression for it, but kind of just like when you've got like a poster or a logo or something like that, where the design itself doesn't really matter. There doesn't really need to be any art behind it, but it just needs to be a unique looking design. I don't think there's any problem with having AI do that, except for perhaps the issue that I think people have said that AI kind of is basically just copyright with extra, or copyright infringement with extra steps, because that's where it gets the images from. And obviously, if that's true, that's an issue. But also of like stock images, like, yeah, I don't know, like why not, instead of having to hire a person to come out and have a picture taken and be like, this is an example of a non-binary person, just to have an AI thing generate an image of a non-binary person. I don't really see the issue there.
I want to thank Dr. Hilary Cass and her team for the thoughtful and thorough way in which they've undertaken their work, given the vulnerability of the young people concerned and the complexity of the, again, vulnerability, complexity of the issues. None of the language actually affirms the existence of trans people. It's all crap.
Good. Get over it. Not everyone has to agree with your stupid moron cult religion. Get over it. Stop freaking out about this. It's genuinely so annoying. It's like listening to a Muslim like freaking out about some kind of like anti like Islamophobia inquiry, and they're like, but I was going to try and do like a Muslim accent, like not they kind of like but none of the people, they kind of talk like, I know that they can actually be like, there's no reason why a Muslim couldn't sound like me, but I'm going to do like a typical like Dawa accent. They often talk like this. They'd be like, oh, but none of the people are even acknowledging the fact that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. Like they're talking about this. They're saying like, oh, we need to solve the issues for the Muslim community. But if you actually read what they're saying, they're not even saying that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet and that the Quran is the holy word of God. And like, how can they be doing that? That is so offensive to me. Like that's literally what this guy is saying though. He's just freaking out about the fact that while they're talking about like the kind of the trans issue, they're not massively putting a big focus on affirming trans identity itself. And for him, this is like so offensive, but it's just like, it really should not be offending you this much that some people just don't want to acknowledge the nonsense that you're putting down. Like that should not be such a big issue for you.
It's the gasp of a dying empire. Americans don't care this much about trans people. It's the obsession of the British public.
Okay, I'm sorry. The UK is not a dying empire. Like, and I say that because the UK is basically dead as an empire. Like the British Empire died in the 60s. That's such like a weird thing to say, because the US is, if anything, a dying empire. I would say if the UK is anything, it's like I'd say the UK could more be considered on the cusp of ascendance as a world power as opposed to dying, just because pretty much like everything that's ever been bad, like, or everything that's kind of made the UK dying as an empire has been the case since the 1960s, right? Like that's when we literally decolonized the world. But even like that's dead. Never mind dying. I mean, we've been dying since like World War II, when you spent a whole lot of money with that thing, and then obviously lost India. The Suez Crisis happened, which kind of pretty much meant we were like, well, we're probably not going to be able to really do the whole empire thing if we can't even like handle even a regional conflict, things like that. Yeah, the UK is not dying. The United States, again, people say like the United States is a dying empire. I don't really know about that. I think the US still has like a lot of power, soft and hard. I think the UK still has a lot of soft power. But yeah, the idea that it's like the last gasp of dying is such a an illogical thing to say when you actually just think about the UK. And you're like, I mean, the UK, it's not great, but again, it's not really doing, in terms of like world relevance, global relevance, it's really not any different now than it was for the past, like, for my whole lifetime, but yeah, for the past like 5-6 decades. Anyway, I think we'll end it there, to be honest, because I keep yawning. Sorry, I hope you don't mind my armpit hair. I don't think you would. Anyway, yeah, we're gonna end that now, mostly because I just realized that I desperately need to go to the loo. So thank you everyone for paying attention. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you're all excited for next time, when we will be... Well, I don't know what we'll do I? Because I will... Because I will open up nominations next week. We'll have a vote next week, and you will let me know if you feel like me responding to this some more. I do find it enjoyable making fun of Vaush, so I'd be fine with that being what you want me to talk about. But yeah, all right. Until then, I will see you next Tuesday.